I'm Amber, 29, female. I live in a modest but comfortable apartment downtown, a world away from the sprawling suburban mansion where I grew up. I'm a family law attorney, a profession I chose because I believe in structure, rules, and consequences, three things my own family never seemed to value. My life now is quiet, ordered, and entirely my own, built from the ground up after my family decided I was no longer part of theirs. They threw me out 10 years ago with less than $50 to my name, all to protect my brother from the consequences of his own actions. Next month, they're hosting a lavish anniversary party to celebrate 30 years of their perfect marriage, and they made the mistake of sending me an invitation. They have no idea that I'm about to give them a gift they'll never forget, delivered by the United States Treasury Department. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Growing up, our family was less of a unit and more of a solar system with my brother, Kevin, as the son. He was 4 years younger than me, but from the moment he was born, everything revolved around him. My father, Frank, owned a growing chain of luxury car dealerships, and my mother, Susan, was a high-end interior designer. We lived in a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine, a testament to my mother's taste and my father's success. Publicly, we were the ideal family. Privately, the foundation was rotten. Kevin could do no wrong. When he scraped the side of Dad's brand, new Mercedes at 16, it was the car's fault for being too big. When he was caught cheating on his finals, Dad donated a new wing to the school library, and the problem vanished. I, on the other hand, was held to an impossible standard. Straight A's were expected, not celebrated. My passion for debate club was dismissed as argumentative, and my desire to become a lawyer was seen as a strange, unfeminine ambition. "You'll just marry a successful man, Amber," my mother would say, waving a dismissive hand. "You don't need a stressful career." The disparity was never more apparent than when it came to finances. Kevin was given a limitless credit card and a sports car for his 18th birthday. I was given a lecture on fiscal responsibility and a part-time job application for the local diner. I didn't mind the work. In fact, I enjoyed the independence. I saved every penny I could, tucking it away for college because I knew, deep down, that I was on my own. My parents had made it clear that their support, both financial and emotional, was reserved for their golden child. My father, Frank, was a man who worshipped two things, money and his son. He was charismatic on the dealership floor, a master of the handshake and the charming smile. But at home, he was a tyrant who ruled with his wallet. His approval was a currency, and I was perpetually broke. He saw Kevin as his legacy, the heir to the dealership empire. He saw me as a temporary resident, an accessory that had to be maintained until she could be handed off to someone else. Susan, my mother, was the architect of our family's public image. She was obsessed with appearances, from the curated art on our walls to the perfect smiles in our Christmas cards. She enabled Kevin's behavior because a troubled son would be a stain on her masterpiece. My ambitions were an inconvenience to her because they didn't fit the picture she had painted. A daughter who argued for a living wasn't as aesthetically pleasing as a daughter who chaired charity luncheons. The household was a constant low-grade performance, and I was the only one who refused to learn my lines. This refusal, this innate need for fairness and truth, was a flaw they couldn't tolerate. It was the crack in their perfect facade, and they were about to deal with it in the most brutal way possible. The breaking point came during my freshman year of college. I was 19, home for the summer, juggling 2 jobs to save for my tuition. Kevin, then 15, was in the middle of a rebellious phase that my parents found endearing. One evening, he took my father's prized vintage convertible out without permission. He wasn't just joyriding, he was drunk. He crashed the car into a neighbor's fence, and the police were called. I was in my room studying when I heard the shouting. I ran downstairs to find Kevin, crying and reeking of alcohol, with my parents hovering over him. My father was on the phone with his lawyer, his voice a low, angry growl. My mother was stroking Kevin's hair, murmuring, "It's okay, baby, we'll fix this." When the police officer asked who was driving, Kevin, in a moment of pure, cowardly panic, pointed a shaking finger at me. "It was her," he whimpered. "Amber. She was driving. She made me come with her." The world stopped. I stared at him, my mouth agape. My parents' eyes flickered towards me, and in that instant, I saw the calculation. Protecting Kevin, their precious heir, was paramount. Sacrificing me was a small price to pay. "Is this true, Amber?" My father asked, his tone leaving no room for my answer. It wasn't a question, it was a command. "No, that's a lie," I shouted. "He's been drinking. Look at him." But they didn't look at him. They only looked at me, their faces hardening into masks of cold disappointment. My father ended the call with his lawyer and told the officer that his daughter had made a terrible mistake and they would handle all the damages. He presented me as the irresponsible older sister who had endangered her younger brother. Given our family's standing in the community and Frank's smooth, talking nature, the officer took his report, issued me a citation for reckless driving, and left. There was no breathalyzer, no further questions. My father had made the problem go away. The moment the front door closed, the act was over. My father turned to me, his face contorted with a rage I had never seen before. "How could you?" he seethed. "You could have ruined your brother's life. I didn't do anything." I pleaded, tears streaming down my face. "He's lying. Dad, please, you have to believe me." He didn't. He saw only his son's future flashing before his eyes. A DUI on his record, trouble with college applications, a blemish on the family name. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin, and dragged me towards the door. "You are a danger to this family," he snarled. "You are selfish and ungrateful." My mother simply watched, her arms crossed, her expression blank. She didn't say a word. She just watched as my father threw my purse at me and shoved me out the front door. "Get out," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "You are no longer welcome here. Don't come back." I stood on the manicured lawn in shock, the door slamming shut behind me. The deadbolt clicked into place. I opened my purse with trembling hands. Inside was my wallet, containing two $20 bills, 3 ones, and some loose change. $43. That's what I was worth to them. $43 and a locked door. That night, I didn't just lose my home. I lost the last shred of hope that my family would ever see me as anything more than a disposable part of their perfect picture. The first few nights were a blur of cheap motels and stale coffee. I spent hours calling my parents, leaving desperate, tearful voicemails that were never returned. My key was gone, my belongings were hostage in my childhood bedroom, and my bank account, which was linked to theirs, had been emptied. They had systematically erased me. The $43 was all I had. I knew going back was not an option. Their betrayal was absolute. So, with the kind of clarity that only comes from hitting rock bottom, I started to fight. I used the last of my money to take a bus to my college town 3 hours away. I slept on a friend's couch for a week until I found a tiny, run-down room for rent above a laundromat. The landlord let me move in with a promise to pay the deposit within a month. My first mission was survival. I got a third job waiting tables at an all-night diner. My days were a grueling cycle. Classes from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., a shift at the campus library from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m., and then the diner from 8 p.m. until 2 a.m. I slept in 4-hour bursts and lived on coffee and the free meals I got at the diner. I was exhausted, but I was also fueled by a white-hot rage that burned brighter than any fatigue. Every textbook I read, every exam I aced, every dollar I saved was an act of defiance. It was during this time that I reconnected with Chloe. We'd been friends in high school but had drifted apart. When she heard what happened, she was furious on my behalf. Chloe was studying to be a journalist, and she had a natural skepticism and a fierce loyalty that I desperately needed. She became my rock, my sounding board, and my one-woman support system. She'd bring me care packages of instant noodles and second-hand textbooks, and more importantly, she'd listen. She was the first person to tell me, what they did wasn't just cruel, Amber, it was wrong. She reminded me that I wasn't the problem. The legal battle over the car accident was a nightmare. My father hired a top lawyer who painted me as a reckless, troubled teen. Without resources to fight back, I was forced to plead no contest to the reckless driving charge. It stained my record, and I had to complete community service and pay a hefty fine, which I did in $5 increments from my waitressing tips. The injustice of it all settled deep in my bones, hardening my resolve. It was this experience that solidified my decision to pursue law. I wasn't just going to be a lawyer. I was going to be the kind of lawyer who fought for people who were silenced and betrayed, just like I had been. I graduated from college with honors, a feat accomplished through sheer grit. I immediately applied to law school, writing my entrance essay on the topic of justice and family dynamics. I was accepted into a prestigious program with a partial scholarship. To cover the rest, I took out student loans, burying myself in debt, but I saw it as an investment in my future. a future that would be entirely mine. For 3 years I barely slept. I read case law until my eyes blurred. I pushed myself harder than I ever thought possible. When I finally walked across that stage to receive my Juris Doctor degree, I didn't see my family in the audience. I saw Chloe, cheering louder than anyone. In that moment, I knew I had built a new foundation, one that couldn't be taken away from me. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, and I was just getting started. After law school, I passed the bar on my first try and landed a job at a respected family law firm in a major city, far from my hometown. I specialized in contentious divorces and asset division cases. I was good at it. I understood the way people hid money, the way they used finances as a weapon, and the way they constructed elaborate lies to protect themselves. My own history had been the perfect, brutal training ground. For years, I focused solely on my career, building a reputation for being meticulous, relentless, and fair. I paid off my student loans, bought my own apartment, and built a life of stability and independence. I had almost no contact with my family. They never called. I never reached out. The only updates I got were through the grapevine or my mother's ostentatious social media posts, which Chloe would occasionally show me. I saw photos of Kevin graduating from a business program my father had paid for, photos of lavish family vacations I wasn't invited on, and eventually an announcement that Kevin was the new sales manager for the entire dealership chain. It was all a carefully curated performance of family bliss. The thread that would unravel everything appeared on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Chloe, now a successful investigative journalist, called me. "Amber, you're going to want to see this," she said, her voice tight with excitement. "I'm working on a story about luxury goods industries and tax avoidance. I was digging into car dealerships and a familiar name popped up." She sent me a link to a series of public records. It was a list of shell corporations, all registered in states known for their lax business regulations. The names were generic, Prestige Holdings LLC, Automotive Ventures Inc., but the registered agent for each one was a name I recognized, my father's long-time accountant. Chloe had started digging deeper. She found that these corporations were buying and selling luxury vehicles amongst themselves in a dizzying loop. A car would be sold from my father's primary dealership to a shell company at a loss, creating a tax write-off. That same car would then be sold from one shell company to another, each time with small, incremental price hikes, before finally being sold to an overseas buyer for a massive, untaxed profit. "It's a classic transfer pricing scheme," Chloe explained. "He's creating artificial losses on paper to slash his domestic tax bill while banking the real profits offshore. It's sophisticated, and it looks like he's been doing it for years." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just shady accounting. This was felony-level tax. Isn't just shady accounting. This was felony-level tax evasion. As I looked through the documents Chloe sent, a specific pattern emerged. The scheme seemed to have escalated dramatically about 10 years ago, right around the time I was thrown out. It was as if, after cutting ties with the one person in the family who valued rules, my father felt free to break all of them. Then I saw it, a property deed. One of the shell corporations had purchased a multi-million-dollar penthouse apartment in the city. The listed resident of that apartment, Kevin. My father hadn't just given him a job, he had bought him a lavish lifestyle with untaxed money. The down payment for that apartment was made the same month I was scrubbing floors to pay my community service fine. The anger I felt was so profound, so visceral, it almost took my breath away. All those years, I had believed they discarded me simply because they preferred him. The truth was worse. They discarded me because my moral compass was a threat to their criminal enterprise. I didn't fit in, not because I was argumentative, but because I was honest. The invitation arrived a few weeks later. It was thick cream, colored cardstock with gold embossed lettering, announcing the 30th wedding anniversary of Frank and Susan. It was a summons disguised as a celebration, a power play to show the world, and perhaps me, that they were thriving. My first instinct was to tear it to shreds. My second was to see it for what it was, an opportunity. A perfect golden-edged opportunity. I called Chloe. They're throwing a party. I said, my voice steady, a huge one at the country club, and they invited me. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a low whistle. "Wow, the audacity. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to give them a gift," I replied, "something they can't return." My plan began to form, each piece clicking into place with the precision of a legal argument. Chloe had already gathered a mountain of evidence through her journalistic research. It was compelling, but to get the attention of the right people, it needed to be packaged perfectly. We spent the next several weeks in my apartment, surrounded by documents, spreadsheets, and endless cups of coffee. My legal expertise and her investigative skills were a potent combination. We organized the evidence into a neat, undeniable narrative. We traced the flow of money from the dealerships to the shell corporations. We compiled property records, sales invoices, and banking statements that Chloe had legally obtained through public record requests and source leaks. We created a clear timeline that showed a decade of systematic fraud, amounting to millions of dollars in unpaid taxes. The final package was a whistleblower report, anonymous, detailed, and utterly damning. It was a work of art. The next step was delivery. Simply sending it to the IRS was one thing, but I wanted to ensure it was seen by the right division, the Criminal Investigation Unit. Through a contact from my pro bono work, I found the name of a senior agent in the regional office known for his tenacity with Hine. At Worth Individuals, we submitted the report through the official IRS whistleblower portal, referencing a specific case number and flagging it for his attention. We submitted it under a pseudonym, routing it through encrypted channels to ensure it couldn't be traced back to us. The final piece of the plan was the timing. The party was on a Saturday night. I knew from my father's business patterns that he often finalized large international sales at the end of the month. The party was on the 30th. It was perfect. The IRS moves slowly, but a detailed report of active, large-scale fraud can accelerate things. I calculated that if the report was compelling enough, they might not just start an audit, they might move to secure assets to prevent capital flight. An event where the entire family, along with their business associates and accountants, were all gathered in one place would be an investigator's dream. A week before the party, I RSVP'd. Amber will be delighted to attend. I wrote on the little card. I picked out my outfit, a simple, elegant dark blue dress. It was professional, understated, and the color of justice. I didn't need to be flashy. The real fireworks wouldn't be coming from me. They would be coming from the government. The country club was dripping with my parents' brand of performative wealth. Ice sculptures melted under opulent chandeliers, a string quartet played softly in the corner, and champagne flowed like water. My mother, draped in diamonds, and my father, beaming in a tailored tuxedo, greeted their guests by the door. Their friends, a collection of the city's elite, kissed the air by their cheeks, congratulating them on 3 decades of manufactured happiness. When I walked in, a hush fell over their immediate circle. My father's smile tightened at the edges. My mother's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before her socialite mask snapped back into place. "Amber," she said, her voice a little too bright, "you came how? Lovely. You invited me." I replied coolly, handing them a small, empty gift box. I wouldn't miss it. The empty box was a private joke just for me. It represented what they had given me. My brother, Kevin, swaggered over, a glass of champagne in his hand. He looked me up and down, a smirk playing on his lips. "Look what the cat dragged in," he said. "Decided to crawl back, did you?" Something like that. I said, my gaze unwavering, enjoying the penthouse, Kevin. The color drained from his face. It was a small jab, but it landed perfectly, letting him know that I knew something. Before he could respond, my father clapped him on the shoulder, pulling him away to greet a city councilman. I spent the next hour making polite, meaningless conversation, a ghost at a feast held in my honor, though they didn't know it yet. I nursed a single glass of club soda, watching the clock. At precisely 8:30 p.m., the double doors to the ballroom swung open. It wasn't more guests. It was 4 people, 3 men and a woman, dressed in dark, conservative suits. They didn't look like partygoers. They moved with a quiet authority that cut through the music and chatter. One of them, a stern-looking man with graying temples, approached my father. I recognized him from the photo my contact had shown me. "It was the senior agent, Frank," the agent asked, his voice calm but firm. My father's jovial mask fell, replaced by confusion. "Yes, can I help you?" The agent held up his badge. "I'm a special agent with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. We have a warrant to seize business records at your primary residence and place of business. We'd also like to ask you and your son, Kevin, a few questions." The entire room went silent. The music screeched to a halt as the violinist's bow slipped. Every eye was on my father, whose face had turned a pasty white. My mother let out a small, horrified gasp, her hand flying to her throat. Kevin looked like he was about to be sick. There must be some mistake. My father stammered, trying to laugh it off. "This is a private party." "There's no mistake, sir," the agent said, his voice dropping any pretense of friendliness. "And our investigation is not a private matter. 2 other agents flanked Kevin, who looked like a trapped animal. They weren't arresting them, not yet. They were isolating them, controlling the scene." The 4th agent began speaking quietly with the club manager. The party was over. I stood by the bar, watching the beautiful facade of my family's life crumble into dust in real time. My father's powerful friends began to melt away, suddenly remembering urgent appointments, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. My mother was frozen, her perfect smile shattered. My father's eyes scanned the room, desperate and confused, until they landed on me. I was the only one who wasn't whispering or backing away. I was just watching, my expression neutral. In that moment, he knew. He didn't know how, but he knew this was my doing. The hatred in his eyes was so pure, it was almost cleansing. I raised my glass of club soda in a silent toast. For the reckless driving charge, for the stolen tuition money, for the $43, for 10 years of struggle that they never once acknowledged. I took a slow sip, turned, and walked out of the ballroom, leaving them to the uninvited guests and the consequences they had spent a decade earning. The fallout was catastrophic for my family, and it played out in the headlines for months. Chloe's newspaper broke the story first. A meticulously researched expose on my father's tax evasion scheme, published the Monday after the party. The article didn't mention me, but it detailed the shell corporations, the offshore accounts, and the millions in unpaid taxes. The public nature of the investigation meant my father couldn't just make it disappear with a high-priced lawyer. The evidence was too overwhelming, the numbers too stark. Frank and Kevin were indicted on charges of tax fraud and conspiracy. To avoid a longer sentence, my father took a plea deal. He was sentenced to 5 years in a federal, low-security prison. He was forced to pay back all the unpaid taxes, plus steep penalties and interest, a sum so enormous it wiped out nearly his entire fortune. The car dealerships were sold off to cover the debt, the mansion, the vintage cars, the country club membership, all of it was liquidated. Kevin, in a desperate attempt to save himself, tried to pin the blame on his father, claiming he was just following orders. But emails and bank records proved he was an active participant, knowingly spending the fraudulent funds. He got a lighter sentence, 18 months, due to his cooperation, but he would forever be a convicted felon. My mother, Susan, was not charged with any crime, but she faced a different kind of sentence. Her social standing evaporated overnight. The friends who had once flocked to her parties now crossed the street to avoid her. She was forced to sell her designer clothes and jewelry to afford a small condo. The beautiful life she had curated with such fierce dedication was gone, replaced by shame and public disgrace. The masterpiece had been revealed as a forgery. I never spoke to any of them again. Their lawyers reached out a few times, likely on a fishing expedition to see if I would be a character witness, but I instructed my assistant to decline all calls. There was nothing left to say. My actions were my final statement, with the whistleblower reward money, a substantial percentage of the taxes the IRS recovered. I did 2 things. First, I paid off the mortgage on my apartment. The feeling of owning my home, free and clear, was a security I had never known. Second, I started a nonprofit foundation. It provides legal aid and educational scholarships to young adults who have been disowned or forced out of their homes, helping them get back on their feet and build independent futures. It's my way of ensuring that other 19-year-olds left with nothing but pocket change and a locked door have a resource I never did. My life now is full. My law practice is thriving. Chloe and I are closer than ever, partners in crime, fighting. I'm building a new legacy, one not based on a name or inherited wealth, but on resilience, integrity, and a fierce commitment to justice. It's a legacy written not in a ledger of lies, but in the case files of the people I help and the futures my foundation supports. Sometimes, when I'm working late in my quiet office, I think about that empty gift box I gave my parents. It was a symbol of the emptiness they left me with, but in the end, they were the ones who were truly empty. Their lives were a hollow shell, built on greed and deceit. I, on the other hand, had taken the nothing they gave me and built everything, and that is the best revenge of all.